Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Catholic Psychology with Dr. Peter Malinoski from Souls and Hearts. I'm Trevor with Focus. And Dr. Malinoski, for those that do not know you, do you want to explain yourself?
Sure. I'm a Catholic clinical psychologist. I've been in practice for more than 20 years. I've got a private practice in Indianapolis, and I'm also the co-founder and president of Souls and Hearts at soulsandhearts.com. And we are all about bringing the best of psychology firmly rooted in a Catholic understanding to the entire English-speaking Catholic world. So that's what we're all about. You can check that out at soulsandhearts.com.
Today, we have, I think, a very crucial topic, especially today, a situation that is rampant, especially across college campuses where Focus works, very much plaguing a lot of men and women too, of course. But what specifically are we going to talk about today?
We are talking about the top 10 reasons why Catholic men masturbate and use porn. And when people have come across this title before, they're like, 10? I can think of 3, 2, 1, maybe reason, but there's actually a lot of different reasons why men, Catholic men, and I'm not just talking about men that were baptized Catholic and have fallen away from the faith but are still Catholic by virtue of their baptism. I'm talking about people that want to live out what the church teaches in terms of sexual morality, that want to be living out the fullness of Catholic truth with regard to their sexual lives. So,
no, it's a good situation, because we see this a lot on campus, where it's just a constant situation where practicing Catholic men that don't want to do this. They don't want to say they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it spiritually. They want it out of their lives, and it's oftentimes something that has been plaguing them for many years, up until maybe a recent conversion or reversion back to the faith. But yet it's still an ongoing situation. It's still an ongoing problem, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah, and it's extremely common. Depending on which surveys you're looking at, and I looked at a number of them, anywhere between 80 and 92% of men have masturbated in the last year. It doesn't break out Catholic men. I couldn't find something that broke it up by religious denomination, but it's something that's extremely common. And then the question becomes why, right? I mean, you can hear the echoes of Romans 7:15, right? When Paul asks, why is it that I do that which I don't want to do? Now, I'm not saying that was all about masturbation. Some people have speculated that, but I think there are reasons to believe that it's actually not that. But yeah, the question of why do we do what we don't want to do? And the answer is that we're not as sovereign over our will as we like to think. Right? Sure. And Paul is struggling with this, and I can't think of another saint that's had a stronger will than Paul, right? So, this isn't just a question of willpower, and gutting it out and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I actually don't always think that it's a matter of temptation. Mm-hmm. I make a distinction between temptations, which come from powers and principalities, from demons outside of us, and impulses which arise from within us and are actually not supernatural in their origin. And so we want to actually take a deeper dive. But before I get into what the actual reasons are, I want to give you the reasons that men give me for why Catholic men give me, serious Catholic men, they're devout, want to live the faith, why they give me for what they masturbate. Like if you were a fly on the wall in my office over the last 20 years and you heard the men that came in, and why they said that they masturbated, you get answers like this. Number 1, lust. I just want pleasure, lust. Number 2, I'm weak. I lack willpower. Number 3, I do it to de-stress or to calm down or to unwind or to relax or to fall asleep. Number 4, they'll tell you something like, I do it out of habit. It's a habit. 5, anger. 6, boredom. Sometimes you'll get, well, my wife or my girlfriend sometimes is, frigid or cold or sexually distant, withholding. Sometimes you'll get this one, which is, I do it so that I don't act out with my girlfriend, right? Sort of a preventative measure, in quotes, sort of, you'll get this answer: I do it because I'm bad, right? Like this is where you get a lot of resignation, a lot of shame, a lot of like really believing that I'm inadequate. And then sometimes you'll get this, the devil made me do it, right? This temptation. I felt a temptation. And then another really common response, it's not a reason that men give for why they do this, but it's a response. And they say, I don't know. I don't know why I do this. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to be doing this. I do it anyway. That's actually really, really common. So those are 10 reasons plus one extra response that are really common, but they're actually not, they don't, when you start getting below the surface of this, you actually start seeing a very different picture about what the underlying unconscious motives are.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that there are conscious and unconscious reasons here, because these guys, I'm sure, are trying to be as honest as possible. And it feels like someone with your background that's able to go deeper and look into the research and your background when it comes to psychology, you're able to see things that these guys cannot even see, that I'm sure that I cannot even see, right? That there are deeper reasons for why these symptoms prop up. I mean, it can look like this that we were talking about today, but it can look like a lot of other psychological issues we've talked about in other videos. These are symptoms for something often deeper that we don't even know about.
Right. And they have particular functions. And a lot of times the function of masturbation is unconscious. The reasons why people do it are really unconscious. And so I'll give you a really stunning one that I found early in my career. There was this cycle that a lot of guys found themselves in. Sometimes seminarians would find themselves in this cycle where things were going well. They were doing well in the spiritual life. They were getting closer to God. They were starting to feel like they really had a relationship with God. And then all of a sudden they find that they're masturbating. And this would happen over and over and over again. There was a cycle of this. And they were like, why am I sabotaging myself, right? And when you start to unpack this and you get below it, was it about lust? I'm not going to say that lust isn't involved in these things, but I don't think it's primarily about lust, at least not in the natural realm. Is it about willpower? Is it about, anger, boredom? I'm not seeing those things. What I'm seeing is an attempt for a part of that person to survive. And let me explain what I mean by that. An attempt to put distance between them and God, because their model of relationship was fusion. Like, in order to be in relationship with somebody, you fused with them, right? That's a very sort of primitive way of relating. It's a very basic way of relating. For example, infants, when they're nursing, they don't have a conception that they are separate from mom. As far as they're concerned, at the psychological developmental level, mommy and I are one. We're just one. We're just one being. It's not until you start getting into 12 months, 18 months, especially into the 24 months, that you really see them practicing having a separate sense of self. That's what all that no is about, with the terrible twos and all of that. So if your model is a fusion and you feel like you're getting closer and closer to God, the fear can rise up that God's going to fuse with you. And if the finite fuses with the infinite, the finite's going to be lost. It's going to be annihilated. If God is going to take you over, if you let God into your life in that way, we've got to find some way to keep some limits and boundaries. And so sometimes this is the way that that certain parts of us will keep limits and boundaries in order to avoid being taken over by God, and to avoid the terror of that kind of closeness with God, because we don't really trust that God's going to respect our boundaries, that he's going to want to be separate but near, but rather fused. You'll see this in histories when the person's parents related by fusion, and they never really moved beyond that, where there wasn't a really recognition of the child as a separate individual, as a separate person with his own feelings, thoughts, desires, and so forth, that was respected. And so that's you can say that's a spiritual thing, but I look at that as really a psychological thing. So you'll often see that pattern you know. And that's one of the sort of surprising reasons why sometimes guys will masturbate, especially when things are going well.
That's fascinating, because God really does call us to a whole new life, a whole new renewal of who we are, and setting the old ways aside. We see this in the New Testament all over the place. And it almost seems like maybe acting out in this way is almost like some representation of the old life in a way. Sometimes it's just like holding on because you don't trust that this transition from point A to point B, this total transition, is fully trustworthy. It's something that you can get 100% all in. It's like some type of last holding on to that past almost.
And it goes back to that lack of integration, Trevor, right? Where some parts of us are connecting with God, but others are not. And so, one of the things we want to do in our own internal evangelization is to be able to gently and kindly bring all of us to God. All of what's going on inside of us. That's all the parts of us, right? Remember, our Lord says, you should love the Lord thy God with all your heart and with all your mind, right? With our whole being, including the parts of us that have been rejected, denied, that have been suppressed by other people, and that we suppress or reject or deny within us, our own inner lepers, our own inner tax collectors, the parts of us that we have decided are not worthy to be in relationship with God. And that, again, is often not conscious.
Yeah, and that's going back to our episode, I think 3 episodes ago, about living a fully integrated life and not viewing ourselves as, as we talked about that one time, good Trevor versus bad Trevor. Bad Trevor needs to be put into line, and but that's not the proper view. And it seems like, if you're making this transition to loving God with everything, as it says, love with your whole mind, your whole body, your whole soul. If you view it as like good Trevor, bad Trevor, good Sally, bad Sally, okay, that bad part of me is gonna run into issues. If that's your mindset, then it's almost kind of unsurprising. Now that you've brought it up, I just never thought of it that way.
Well, think about it if you did that with one of your kids, right? Like if you're a parent and you did that with one of your children in the car on a long car ride, that child's going to act out. That child's going to act out. And these parts of us are often like little children within us. And you brought up an excellent point. Another reason why men masturbate is as a cry for help from a part that's exiled in the unconscious. And if they are desperate to be known so that there is some chance that they can actually heal, there's this teleological pull to signal the distress. And when these parts signal the distress, they're going to use a symptom that they know will attract attention, right? And so one way of expressing distress that's going to attract attention to men who are serious about the spiritual life is to engage in something that something like masturbation that they know is grave matter, right? And so it's like, whoa, but it actually can lead to more of a cycle of suppression, repression, condemnation, shaming, and then that cycle never really resolves itself.
A lot of times I've seen this where you act out and then you go to confession the next day and it becomes like this kind of thing that you do, this classic cycle. Is that related to this, of some type of cry for help where you just kind of like, okay, I've committed a grave sin, now I'm going to go to confession and like, okay, wow, things are quote unquote better now, just like from a macro scale, having gone through this whole cycle? Is that related to this cry for help?
Yeah, it can be. So for example, we often have what I think of as uber Catholic self-like manager parts that want to run our lives. And as part of running our lives, they want to run it sort of like the Pharisees, where the undesirables, don't get a voice. They don't get a place at the table. They don't get to be recognized. So if we're led into confession by a well-meaning part of us that hopes that that's going to be it, bada bing, bada boom, we're never going to do this again, but the underlying shame or the underlying trauma or the underlying wound is not being addressed, right? I can imagine parts, on the way home from confession or that night saying, no, 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 no. We're not going to paper over this. This is not going to just go away. We're not just going to, die here or be just utterly rejected without trying to signal our distress. And so then you're back into the old pattern. So a lot of the work around this is to actually break the old patterns and really understand like what the function of it is. What is the good that is being sought when there is masturbation? What are people trying to do? And that's where you get into that's by asking those kind of questions and exploring those kind of motives is how I came up with this list, that I started to see consistent from man to man, is that, wow, there's a lot of commonalities here, and you can't just reduce it to a lack of willpower or lust or, vice or, I'm bad or those kinds of things. That's not, and doesn't give anything like justice to the dimensionality, to the complexity of these things. So, but a lot of times what you find are people that they're dominated by a part that just wants to make it go away. We just want to stop it, right? My life would be great if I only stopped masturbating. That's the only thing. Well, a lot of times, if you've got a single symptom presentation like that, there's a whole lot layered into that one symptom. That symptom is going to express all the distress of all the parts in the unconscious. And so it becomes really very difficult to give that up. And so you have to start to unpack that, and you start finding other issues. So that's also, that's also a loss in a sense, at least a perceived loss. People will be like, hey, I don't want to realize that I have this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem as I start doing this exploration. I just want to have one masturbation problem that if I try hard enough, I can overcome. And you often see that when there's a kind of a lack of psychological mindedness, a lack of introspection.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a serious thing that we're talking about, but it still often points to something deeper. And that's a big reason why God allows these types of things to happen in our lives, or allows us to have to struggle with these things, because he is looking for some type of deeper spiritual, psychological, full healing in our lives. And oftentimes it takes something like this to really actually desire it, even in the first place, let alone let it happen, to let God's love in, because there may be something much more fundamental in our relationship with God that is in need. And this can even be if you're a seminarian or a Catholic that's just going super all in with your life and you're really trying. God may still be asking for something much more deep that needs to be addressed, and that would otherwise not be addressed, honestly.
Well, yeah, because we get complacent, we get comfortable, right? And you kind of see that in Romans 7, right? When our Lord responds to St. Paul, why is it that I do that which I don't want to do, right? So, he glories in his weakness instead. I mean, a lot of this is to help us with deeper issues on the spiritual level, like pride, deeper issues on the natural level, like shame. And so yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue that there's an intrinsic goodness in masturbation, because obviously, grave matter, it's sinful. But in God's permissive will, right, in his passive will, he allows these things to happen so that we might be more motivated to get to the roots. And one of the roots of this is actually a way of acting out against God, a way of punishing God. It's another of these hidden reasons for masturbation. It's a way to retaliate against a really negative God image. And often this is really unconscious. It's not like somebody saying, God, I hate you, so I'm going to masturbate. They're not aware of the hatred, because they're not aware of the anger. They're not aware of the hatred. They're not aware of rage, because that's too threatening. It's too threatening to consciously experience that because of a fear of being smited, a fear of being, thunderbolts coming down from the hand of an angry God who is, who is unrelenting in his standards, too demanding, and so forth. So, oftentimes when I've started to explore this, because this is sometimes the issue that brings men into therapy, you start to explore this within, not too many sessions, you're into, wow, I had no idea I was this angry at God. I had no idea, you know. And it's when you resolve those things, when you actually get into those things, that the symptom becomes no longer necessary. And then it's not even like this huge willpower thing where you will it away. It's like, well, it's not needed anymore. I don't have to punish God. I don't have to set limits and boundaries with God, for example. I don't have to signal distress because the needs are getting met, you know? So what I want to do is render the symptom unnecessary, right? Otherwise, what you get is what Freud called symptom substitution. You know, it might be that you could stop, you know, masturbating, but if the underlying distress isn't addressed, some other kind of expression is going to take its place.
Right. So, it just becomes one big game of whack-a-mole. You knock the mole of porn and masturbation, you knock it out. That would be good, praise God. But then, yeah, exactly. I would hope that other symptoms would come up if it was a serious enough thing that needed to be fixed inside of you. I would hope that there would be something else as well, just to actually get to the root of the situation. If your appendix were about to burst and you did take away the I don't know what the symptoms are, like stomach pain or something.
Stomach pain
like,
and the fever.
I would hope something else came. I would hope something else would. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know what other symptoms are. I would hope, because that's bad. It's really bad if your appendix bursts.
So I'm going to encourage people to. So a couple of key points. Most Catholic men are really confused about why they masturbate. And the reasons that they give for why they masturbate don't always match up with the actual reasons, because of the unconscious, because of all these motivations that we're not aware of. And so we want to start with compassionate attempts to understand. We want to approach, not to avoid. We want to be careful to have the ways that we judge ourselves and that we shame ourselves, to release that, so that we can actually understand what the needs are here. And if we meet the needs, then the likelihood of masturbation goes way down. This is not just something that is a temptation from outside. It's not just something that we need to approach by strength of will. I mean, sometimes, yes, we're going to have to resist temptation. Sometimes we're going to have to exercise a lot of will, but we don't want to make it any harder than it has to be. You know, yeah, I want folks to check out episodes 51 to 56. I do a 6-part series on masturbation and pornography. That's like a 4 or 5 hours on these topics. That's episodes 51 to 56 of Interior Integration for Catholics, soulsandhearts.com. You can find it there. Because I think this is we're not going to have time to get through all of the other reasons. You know, I promised you 10 reasons. I think I gave you 3, 4 maybe. The rest of them are there though. And so it's a great thing. That's episode 51 in particular you might want to check out. And I also go through like these case studies where I make up characters, because I don't want to talk about about actual clients I have.
Right.
I make up composites where you can see how these things play out. And that actually, for a long time, was the most listened to episode of my podcast. For a long time, it was the most listened to podcast episode. So, yeah,
and I mean, the fact that we don't have even enough time to go through to even list all these different reasons just shows how complex this situation is psychologically. It's not, I'm not being holy enough. All right, I'm gonna pray more rosaries, which you should. I do love the rosary. You should go to mass. You should go to confession. You should obviously do these things. But the psychology of something like this is very important. It's very, very important. So I encourage you to go into these episodes and get the full reasons, and also get the ways to address these reasons too. I mean, even just knowing the fact that there are deeper reasons than what well-meaning, honest people have told Dr. Malinoski about why they do these things. Just shows the importance of realizing these secret hidden reasons, because honestly, yes, if the sin stops, that is fantastic. Praise God. But I'm actually more impressed and more joyful about that fuller healing that you get psychologically, that, like we talked about, that sin was trying to address. It's not like we said, it is intrinsically evil, but there's some need inside of you that's trying to get addressed and taken care of. And there is the right way to go about it. And in that way, it's a twofold response, twofold benefit from this. And that's a way that God can work, and he often does work. He allows bad things to happen to bring about a greater good.
So so you can check that out again, episodes 51 to 56 of Interior Integration for Catholics. The other thing, is that we've got this new community that Dr. Jerry Crete runs called Catholic Journeymen, and that's a community of faithful Catholic men who seek to renew their lives through prayer, personal growth, healing, and brotherhood. And this topic comes up a lot in Catholic Journeymen. So you can check that out at soulsandhearts.com too if you're looking for some companions on the journey toward wholeness. So I wanted to at least put a little plug in for that as well. So
definitely plug that in. Definitely don't take it alone. That is unwise, to say the least. Find other Catholic brothers that are running the race with you. So Dr. Malinoski, thank you so much for the time on this topic, and we'll see you guys next time.